Hey everyone, my name is Rabbi Samuel Jacobson, and today I'm going to share something with you that will completely change the way you view life, death, and the coming of the Messiah. For over 50 years, I dedicated my life to studying the Torah, leading my community in Long Island, and ensuring my congregation's spiritual growth. But one fateful night, everything changed. A night where I experienced something I never imagined possible. I was clinically dead for 13 minutes and 42 seconds. I want to take you on a journey of what happened during that time and how it shifted everything I believed. Before diving into my experience, let me give you some background about who I was. I was born into a well-regarded Orthodox Jewish family in the heart of New York. My father, Rabbi David Jacobson, was a respected scholar in our community, and my mother, Miriam, descended from a long line of Jewish sages from Eastern Europe. From an early age, the weight of my family's legacy was placed on my shoulders. I excelled in my studies and was recognized as a prodigy in the Torah. By the time I was 12, I could recite entire chapters in Hebrew and Aramaic. I became known as the young scholar in the circles I frequented. I was raised in the vibrant Jewish community of Crown Heights, Brooklyn, where tradition ran deep and faith was the foundation of every day. My father, Rabbi David Jacobson, was a well-respected figure, known for his wisdom and dedication to Talmudic scholarship. My mother, Miriam, came from a lineage of rabbis who were scholars, teachers, and community leaders. From the moment I was born, it seemed like my path was set, my purpose clear. I followed in the footsteps of those who had come before me. As a child, I was blessed with a sharp mind and a passion for the Torah that exceeded that of most others my age. By 10, I could fluently read and write Hebrew, and by 12 I had memorized large portions of the Torah just as my father had hoped. It was during this time that I earned the nickname the Living Scroll, and my studies only intensified. My bar mitzvah speech on Jewish prophecy drew the attention of respected scholars from all over the city, and by 18, it was clear that I was destined for leadership. In my late teens, I attended the yeshiva, where my thirst for knowledge grew even deeper. I spent hours poring over ancient texts, engaging in spirited debates with my fellow students. It was there that I met Rabbi Mordecai Goldstein, a man who would later become my mentor. Rabbi Goldstein was different from the others. While they focused on the laws and rituals, he taught us to look beyond the letter of the law and understand its spirit. His teachings would remain with me forever. At 24, I married Rachel, the daughter of another well-respected rabbi, and our union was seen as a perfect match within the community. Our shared love for Torah study and our commitment to living a life steeped in tradition made us a model couple. Over the years, we were blessed with 3 children: Eli, who was now 22 and pursuing his own rabbinical studies, Miriam, 19, studying Jewish history at university, and young Daniel, who was 16 and already showing signs of a deep love for Torah, just like I had at his age. At 30, I was appointed the head rabbi of Congregation Beth Israel in Long Island, making me one of the youngest to hold such a position. My leadership quickly transformed the congregation, and what started as a modest community of around 250 families grew into a thriving congregation of more than 1,000. My approach to Jewish law and my ability to address contemporary issues with ancient wisdom made me a respected figure not just in Long Island, but throughout the region. I was invited to speak at various conferences, my sermons frequently drawing visitors from synagogues across the area, and I was published in many well-regarded religious journals. But, as successful as my life seemed on the outside, a few questions quietly lingered in the corners of my mind. I'd had doubts for years, especially when I would study passages in the prophets, like those in Isaiah 53, that seemed to point to something I wasn't ready to accept. Still, I dismissed these thoughts, burying them beneath layers of scholarly interpretations. But deep down, I knew something was missing. It wasn't until one cold winter night that everything would change. On January 9th, 2024, everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the Messiah was about to be shattered. That night I died for 13 minutes and 42 seconds. But more than that, it was a night that marked the beginning of an incredible journey, one that would forever alter my path. That evening began like any other. I led the evening prayers, spent time with my family, and worked on a sermon for the following week. It was a quiet night. My wife Rachel and I had just finished dinner when she accidentally spilled a glass of water onto our toaster while reaching for some napkins. It was a silly, inconsequential incident, or so I thought. As she suggested buying a new toaster, I insisted on fixing it myself. It seemed like a simple task. Just a little water, I thought. It'll dry out and be fine. Looking back now, I can see how this mundane event would become the doorway to something much bigger. At 11:57 p.m., I was simply standing in the kitchen, tired but confident, fixing an appliance. Rachel had already gone to bed, and my son Daniel was staying over at a friend's house. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. I had unplugged the toaster earlier, allowing it to dry, but now I wanted to inspect it, just to make sure it was ready to be plugged back in. It was a task I had done countless times before, but this time, as I tilted the toaster and examined the inside with a flashlight, I noticed a few lingering droplets of water near the heating elements. Without thinking, I reached for a cloth to dry them off, forgetting that the water might have reached the electrical components. The next moment, a violent surge of electricity coursed through my body, sending me crashing backwards into the countertop. My head struck the granite with a sickening thud, and in that instant, everything went black. But it wasn't the usual darkness you experience when you close your eyes. It was a void, a complete absence of everything. My home, my family, my very existence seemed to vanish. I was no longer in my kitchen. One moment I was there, and the next I was in a place that defied all earthly understanding. The air was thick, heavy, pressing down on my soul as though it was suffocating me. The darkness I found myself in wasn't just an absence of light. It felt alive, pulsating with an oppressive presence that seemed to feed off fear and despair. In all my years of studying the Torah and Talmud, I had never imagined such a reality could exist. As my awareness expanded, I began to hear sounds, voices crying out in torment, not from physical pain, but from the pain of having realized their truth too late. It was as if the very essence of regret and lost opportunities filled the air. I could understand their words despite the fact that they were in languages I recognized, Hebrew, Yiddish, English, but their message was the same: sorrow, regret, and loss. These were not just the anguished cries of the damned, but the desperate realization of souls who finally understood what they had rejected in life. It was then that I noticed faces, hundreds, perhaps thousands, emerging from the walls of this shadowy realm. They were frozen in expressions of unimaginable anguish. Some were faces I recognized, respected rabbis I had known in life, scholars I had studied under, and even some of my contemporaries. Their presence here in this place of torment completely shattered my understanding of everything I thought I knew. How could these men, who had dedicated their lives to studying Torah and teaching others, be in this place? The first face I saw clearly was that of Rabbi Menachem Kadosh, one of my most influential teachers from my years in yeshiva. His face, once radiant with joy and passion for Torah, was now contorted with unimaginable suffering. "Ezra," he called to me, his voice filled with sorrow. "We were wrong, all of us. We knew the prophecies, but in our pride, we refused to accept the truth." I had always revered Rabbi Kadosh, and hearing his voice now filled with such remorse left me speechless. Another voice joined in, Rabbi Shlomo ben Ari, a scholar whose works I had studied for years. His face too was twisted in regret. "We made the law our idol," he lamented. "And in doing so, We missed the very Messiah we had been waiting for. The words stung like daggers, and I couldn't escape the reality that these men, these great minds, had missed the truth. They had overlooked the very signs they had spent their lives studying. As I moved deeper into this realm, the realization began to sink in. These souls were not suffering at the hands of an external force. Their torment came from within, from the profound awareness of what they had rejected. It was the full realization of the truth they had denied in life. Each face I saw, each voice I heard, shared the same painful recognition. And it was then that I realized the teachings I had so fervently held on to, the arguments I had constructed to reject the Messiah, were now falling apart. One by one, more faces emerged from the walls, men I had known, men I had studied with, men whose works I had read with admiration. And each of them, from the most esteemed to the most humble, was now a witness to their own regret. They had missed something critical, and now, in this place of ultimate truth, there was no denying it. But there was one face that struck me with the most force, the face of Rabbi Menachem Kadosh. He called out to me once again, his voice echoing in the darkness. "Ezra, don't be like us. Don't follow our path. Open your eyes. The truth is right before you." His words burned into my soul, and in that moment I realized something terrifying. These were not just ordinary souls. These were the wise, the learned, the ones who had spent their lives teaching and preserving the law. And they, too, had missed the truth. As the realization began to take hold, the weight of it all became almost unbearable. The faces in the walls started to speak in unison, their voices now a chorus of warning and regret. They recited the prophecies, but not in the reverent tones of study. No, this was the anguished cry of those who had failed to see the truth. Isaiah 53, Zechariah's prophecy of the pierced one, Daniel's timeline of the Messiah's coming. These were no longer abstract ideas. They were the very prophecies that had been fulfilled before their eyes, and yet they had refused to accept them. In this overwhelming moment, when the darkness threatened to consume me, something extraordinary happened. A light appeared in the distance, small at first, but growing brighter and more intense with each passing second. This wasn't just any light. It wasn't the artificial glow of the world I knew. It was something pure, something living, something that brought with it an overwhelming sense of truth and love. The light seemed to pierce through the darkness, pushing it away, replacing it with something that felt both comforting and powerful. As the light grew stronger, the oppressive weight of the darkness began to lift. It was as though a heavy fog was being blown away by a mighty wind, leaving in its place a sense of peace and clarity. The souls around me reacted to the light in different ways. Some turned away, recoiling from its brilliance as if it caused them pain, while others reached out toward it, desperate to draw closer. I could feel the light drawing me in, as if it was calling to me, offering something I had never known before. The faces in the walls, once vivid with regret and anguish, began to fade into the background, their voices fading into silence. In their place, there was only the light, radiant, pure, and filled with a presence that seemed to encompass all of existence. I could sense that this was no ordinary light. It carried with it the very essence of truth and love, a force so powerful that I couldn't help but fall to my knees before it. As I knelt, overwhelmed by the light's presence, I became aware of a figure emerging from the center of the radiance. At first, I could make out no details. The light was too intense, but as the figure drew closer, I began to see more clearly. The figure was clothed in simple white garments that seemed to glow with the light itself, and though his features were difficult to make out, there was something about him that felt both ancient and timeless. It was then that I realized this was not an angel or messenger. This was something far greater. This was the one whom the prophets had spoken about, the one I had studied for my entire life, but had never truly understood. The presence before me was so overwhelming that every fiber of my being recognized it immediately. This was the Messiah. His eyes, though nearly blinding in their brilliance, held within them all the love of the universe. His gaze seemed to pierce through me, seeing into the deepest corners of my soul, yet there was no condemnation, only compassion. I felt unworthy to be in his presence, yet I also felt an undeniable peace. Every doubt, every question I had carried in my heart for years melted away in that moment. All my theological arguments, all my carefully constructed beliefs about the law and the Messiah seemed irrelevant in the face of this overwhelming truth. As I knelt before him, I felt my entire being transformed. Every ounce of certainty I had once held about the law, about God, and about the world was suddenly rendered insignificant in comparison to the presence standing before me. The figure didn't speak right away, but I could feel his gaze upon me, as if he was waiting for something. And then his voice, gentle yet filled with undeniable authority, broke through the silence. "Ezra, my son," he said, and his words resonated not just in my ears, but deep within my soul. "You have sought me all your life. You've searched the scriptures, taught others and prayed, but you have not found me where you expected. You've rejected me where I was standing right in front of you." Every word he spoke carried a weight, unlike anything I had ever experienced. I thought back to the years I spent arguing against the possibility of a suffering Messiah, to the countless debates I had engaged in, trying to prove that the Messiah had not yet come. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? But the Messiah's words carried no condemnation, only an invitation to understand. He wasn't angry, he wasn't disappointed. He was patient. He was offering me the chance to see the truth I had spent my entire life overlooking. In that moment, I understood the deep significance of what he was saying. I had spent my life building theological frameworks to avoid the truth. I had explained away the prophecies, dismissed the idea of a suffering Messiah, and convinced myself that the signs had yet to be fulfilled. But now, standing before the very figure these scriptures had pointed to, I realized how wrong I had been. I had misunderstood everything. And then he said something that would change everything I thought I knew. "I am the one your prophet spoke of. I am the Messiah." As his words sank in, I felt a wave of clarity and understanding wash over me. Prophecies I had studied for years suddenly made sense in a way I had never considered. Isaiah's words about the suffering servant, Zechariah's prophecy of the pierced one, and Daniel's timeline of the Messiah, they all fell into place, and I saw them for what they truly were, revelations of the coming of the Messiah. The more the Messiah spoke, the more the fog of confusion lifted from my mind. His presence, so full of light and truth, had a way of cutting through the deepest layers of my beliefs, revealing what I had been blind to for so long. "What you have studied, what you have taught, all of it pointed to me," he said, his voice filled with both love and sadness. "The law was never meant to be the end. It was always meant to lead you to me." As I absorbed his words, I began to see the entire story of Scripture through new eyes. The Torah, the prophets, and the writings, all of it had a deeper purpose. Every law, every sacrifice, every festival pointed toward the Messiah. The Passover lamb, the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles, they were all prophetic pictures of the work of redemption that had been accomplished through him. The law had been a tutor leading me to this moment, but I had never truly understood its full meaning. "You still celebrate these festivals," the Messiah continued, "but you have forgotten their true significance. You keep Passover, but you don't recognize the Lamb of God. You observe Yom Kippur, but you fail to see that the final atonement has already been made. You build sukkahs, but you don't understand that I came to dwell among you." Each of these words pierced my heart like a sword. Everything I had known, Everything I had been taught was now seen in a new light. The Torah wasn't just a set of rules to be followed, it was a roadmap pointing directly to the Messiah. And now, standing in his presence, I saw how much I had missed. But the most profound revelation came next. "You may have missed it," he said, "but it's not too late. Your people must understand. The Messiah has already come, and he is coming again." The weight of those words hung in the air, and I knew they were true. But the implications were staggering. I had spent my life teaching the opposite. I had rejected this truth. How could I go back? How could I share this with others when everything I had built my life around was now in question? But the Messiah's words were filled with compassion and understanding. "Remember, Ezra, you are not alone in this. Many of your people have already recognized me, and many more are waiting for the truth to be revealed to them." As I stood there, surrounded by the overwhelming light, I began to understand something profound. The journey I had been on, the path I had walked as a rabbi, had all been leading me to this moment. It wasn't an accident. Everything I had done, every debate, every sermon, every study session had prepared me to recognize the truth when it was revealed to me. The years of devotion, the hours spent memorizing texts, had all led me here, to this encounter with the Messiah. "You are not here by chance, Ezra," the Messiah continued, his voice gentle yet filled with authority. "This is your moment, and now you must share what you have seen and heard. Tell your people, tell them that their Messiah has come and is coming again. Some will listen, but others will reject you. Some will persecute you, just as they persecuted me. But for the sake of those who are waiting, you must speak." The weight of this mission settled over me, and I knew what I had to do. But there was fear in my heart. Fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing everything I had built. I thought of my congregation, my family, my friends. How could I possibly share this truth with them? How could I ask them to consider something so radically different from everything they had believed? But in that moment, I understood that the truth wasn't mine to withhold. I had been entrusted with it, and I had a responsibility to share it. The Messiah's words filled me with a courage I had never known. "You are not alone," he reminded me. "My spirit will be with you. I will give you the words to speak, and I will guide you every step of the way." As I knelt there, receiving this commission, I knew my life would never be the same. The rabbi I had been, the man who had taught others from a place of certainty, was gone. In his place stood someone who had been reborn, someone who had seen the truth, and someone who had been called to share that truth with the world. The light began to fade, and I felt myself being pulled back toward the physical world. The presence of the Messiah remained with me, but I knew my time in that realm was coming to an end. Before I left, he spoke one final time. "Remember what you've seen, Ezra. Share the truth. The Messiah has come and he is coming again. Tell them your people need to hear it." Suddenly, I was gasping for air on the kitchen floor. The world around me came rushing back, and I was aware of the frantic sounds of my wife Rachel crying out for help, the paramedics working quickly to stabilize me. I had been clinically dead for 13 minutes and 42 seconds. They called it a miracle that I survived without any brain damage. But they didn't know the full truth of what had happened. I had died that night, yes, but in a much deeper sense, I had been reborn. The weeks that followed were filled with turmoil. My life, my ministry, everything I had worked for was now in question. My revelation was met with skepticism, disbelief, and even rejection from many in my community. Some of my closest friends refused to speak to me. My children struggled to understand what had happened to their father. Only Rachel seemed to sense the profound change that had occurred, though even she wrestled with its implications. But in the midst of all the confusion, I found strength in the truth I had received. The scriptures that I had studied my entire life suddenly came alive with new meaning. The prophecies I had struggled to explain now made perfect sense. The God I had served from a distance was now intimately close, and I realized that everything in my life had been a preparation for this moment of revelation. Most surprisingly, I discovered that accepting the Messiah didn't make me less Jewish. It made me more Jewish than I had ever been before. I began to understand our traditions, our prayers, and our festivals in their full prophetic significance. I saw how they all pointed to the Messiah, and how everything in Jewish tradition had always been meant to lead to this moment. Now, as I share this testimony, I understand its weight. Many will dismiss it. Some will think I've lost my mind. Others will call it a betrayal of everything they hold dear. But I cannot deny what I have seen and heard. The truth that has transformed my life is not something I can keep to myself. To my Jewish brothers and sisters who may hear this, I urge you to examine the scriptures again, this time with open eyes and an open heart. The Messiah we've been waiting for has already come, and he is coming again. The choice now lies before you, just as it once lay before me, between darkness and light. Choose wisely, because eternity is at stake. Thank you for taking the time to listen. May God bless you abundantly, and may his presence fill your life in ways you never thought possible. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this message with others who might need to hear it. Together, let's prepare for the incredible things God has in store. Remember, you're never alone on this journey. God is with you every step of the way.